Yes, it was wonderful running into you, and I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, she's somebody that I would love to interview.
That's
just
nice.
to keep your legacy alive, because I
Yeah.
think you're such a great role model. And why I think that is because you're not one note. You're a very full human being. That
Yeah,
took
I
chances.
guess I'm, I've always loved everything I do, and yet, most people in my business say, well, that's the number one thing in the whole world for them. It never was for me. I love what I do and never would have wanted to do anything else. But I remember when I accepted the Academy Award, my husband said, I said, this is the best moment of my career. And my husband said, why didn't you say it's the best moment of your life? I said, because it wasn't the best moment of my life. Having my children and having my life the way it's been has been the best moment of my life.
Talk a little bit about that. How did you create a life that you could sit here and say that?
To tell you the truth, I didn't really create it. I mean, when people say, what did you do to make it happen? What did you do? Who did you talk to? Who did you meet? There wasn't anybody. I mean, the only two people that I could say were responsible for me being able to have the singing career that I had was Rodgers and Hammerstein, because I was on my way to college to become a veterinarian. I didn't care about singing. I could sing. I thought everybody could sing. It was a natural talent for me. I was the youngest member of the church choir at age 6, in my little town of Smithton, Pennsylvania. And I loved it, and I performed in high school and did all of that, but I thought everybody could do that. And I wanted to be a vet because I was an only child, and I raised everything from, skunks to birds to snakes to you name it. It was the love of my life. But I was on my way to college to do that and stopped off in New York City with my parents, which was a summer holiday. And I knew a pianist that I'd worked with in Pittsburgh, and I called him, and he said, come on up, we'll sing a couple of tunes. And he said, listen, Rodgers and Hammerstein's having open auditions for anybody that wants to sing for them. They had 3 shows running on Broadway at that time.
What was your age at this
And
time?
I was 18. And their shows ran so long, they had to keep replacing chorus people every couple of weeks, Now, I barely knew who they were. I remembered seeing Oklahoma at the one big theater in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and loved the show, But I wasn't sure who they were. I was very young and wasn't into that quite yet. And I said, oh, I couldn't do that. I've never sung. And he said, come on. Anyway, I waited in line with everybody else, got up and sang for the casting director. And he said, Miss Jones, what have you done? And I said, nothing. He said, could you wait a few moments? Mr. Rodgers happens to be across the street rehearsing his orchestra for Oklahoma, which was about to open at City Center and go out on another tour. And I said, well, I guess so, I wasn't sure what I was doing and why I was there. Well, I sang for him, and he said, could you wait? I'm going to call Oscar Hammerstein at home, excuse me, and have him come and hear you. I said, well, I guess so. And my pianist said, Shirley, I hate to do this to you, but I have an airplane to catch. It was some sort of holiday weekend. And he said, I can't stay. And Roger said, never mind, we'll think of something. Well, I waited for about a half hour, and down the aisle comes this tall gentleman, and he said, Miss Jones, do you know the score of Oklahoma? I said, well, I might know some of the music, but I don't know the words. And of course, I'm talking to the lyricist, you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, never mind, I happen to have a score here. I said, but Mr. Hammerstein, I have no one to play. My pianist had to leave. And Rodgers said, we have the full City Center Symphony across the street. Now, I'd never heard a symphony, seen a symphony, let alone sing with one. They took me across the street. I held the score in front of my face, and I sang, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning, Oklahoma, and people will say we're in love with the City Center Symphony. And 3 weeks later, I was in my first Broadway show, South Pacific.